Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. The political world shaken this weekend by a new poll showing former President Donald Trump leading President Biden in nearly every single battleground state. Trump plus 10 in Nevada, which Joe Biden won the last time, plus 6 in Georgia, which Joe Biden won the last time, plus 5 in Michigan and Arizona, both of which Biden won the last time, plus 2 over Biden in Pennsylvania, which Joe Biden won the last time. The tide is turning, and it's turning massively. The Wall Street Journal calling this a 5-alarm fire for the Democratic Party. The poll leading top Democratic strategist David Axelrod to ask whether it is wise for the president to remain in this race, questioning whether he is doing this for his own ego over what is best for the country. That's David Axelrod, the man who got Obama elected twice, as close as you're going to get to an open call for Joe Biden to step aside. Despite the fact that we are nearly a decade into Donald Trump being part of the political world, some political pundits still think Mr. Trump is leading just because the voters, they just don't understand. Watch.
Look, this is a wake-up call. This is frightening for not just the Biden White House. But, I mean, the idea of voting for somebody that's under investigation, even somebody who's been indicted, is one thing. Voting for a convicted felon is another thing entirely. This would be a very radical Trump presidency, much more so than even the first one.
He's not going to break the law. He's not going to storm the Capitol. And does that sound like we're lowering the bar? Maybe.
I find it very, very, very hard to believe that voters will not vote for a president who didn't start an insurrection.
77 million people voted for that guy. And if he gets elected in 24, it will only be worse.
Joining me now is someone who knows firsthand about running for the White House, including against Donald Trump, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. He is the author of a perfectly timed new book that we'll dive into in a bit called Unwoke: How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America, something we're seeing on the streets of America and on college campuses daily these days. Hey, subscribe to the show on YouTube and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Negative dings on credit reports happen to all sorts of people from all socioeconomic backgrounds. Understanding the credit landscape can be extremely tough, and spending the time to dispute and repair these so-called dings can be a full-time job. Good luck if you already have one of those, or children, or anything else going on. For starters, you have to deal with 3 separate credit bureaus, which is a massive headache. It's also a common misconception that people with poor credit scores are just those who simply don't pay their credit card bills. These can be hardworking people who were negatively affected by divorce, identity theft, medical debt, student loans, and just don't have the time or are too overwhelmed to fix it. But if you do not address negative credit items, they can haunt you for years to come, and when it counts the most, like getting a mortgage at a competitive rate. The good news is that our sponsor, Lexington Law, wants to help. Go to lexingtonlaw.com and start today with a free consultation and review. Tell them Megyn sent you at lexingtonlaw.com. Senator Cruz, what a guest for today's topics. Thank you so much for being here.
Megyn, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
No place to start other than that New York Times Siena poll. My God. A couple of top line items for the viewers at home. As I mentioned, Wall Street Journal calls it a 5-alarm fire, perilous. Voters have soured on Joe Biden, shows huge weaknesses, should be the cause for soul searching in the Oval Office and in the White House private residence. Quote, there is a compelling case that Mr. Biden can best help his party and the country by announcing he won't run again. This is, again, the Journal. He now risks squandering his legacy by losing to Mr. Trump in a rematch. Mr. Biden surely does not want to go down in history as the Democrat who overstayed his welcome and restored Donald Trump to power. That's almost exactly the same message from David Axelrod. Overall numbers here, there are enormous doubts about the president's age. He turns 81 later this month. He's the oldest president in American history. 71% of the electorate believes he is too old to be an effective president. An opinion shared across every demographic and geographic group, including 54% of his own supporters. Only 39% believe that about Trump, who's 3 years younger than Biden. Only 19% of Trump's supporters think that's true. There is deep dissatisfaction over Biden's handling of the economy and a host of other issues. The economy is by far driving these numbers, but the other issues aren't helping him, like immigration and national security. A majority of the American public says Mr. Biden's policies have personally hurt them, whereas Trump's helped them. quote from the Times, the multiracial and multi-generational coalition that elected Joe Biden is fraying seriously. Demographic groups that backed Joe Biden by landslide margins in 2020 now are far more closely contested. 2/3 of the electorate say the United States is going in the wrong direction. Wow. Your thoughts on it?
Well, Megyn, I think these poll numbers are a manifestation of the reality of the Biden record, that the last 3 years under Joe Biden have been an absolute train wreck. You know, most elections are decided on the classic question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And for virtually any voter in America, the answer is hell no. I mean, it's not a close question for most voters, unless you happen to be a Mexican drug cartel kingpin, in which case you probably should vote for Joe Biden because your life has gotten much better under Biden. But if you're a young person, your life has gotten much worse, which is why in this poll it shows young people shifting dramatically towards Trump. Or if you're Hispanic or African American, this poll shows 22% of black voters voting Republican, which would be a landmark high water mark. This shows suburban women coming back to Republicans. And you look at the record across the board. I mean, imagine for a second, Megyn, you woke up tomorrow and you'd been given the job of being Joe Biden's campaign manager. You can't run on the record. You can't run on the economy because the economy is a mess. We've got record high inflation. Everyone living, the cost of putting food on your table has gone way up. The cost of paying your bills has gone way up. Rent, mortgages, like if you want to buy a new home, forget about it. You got an 8% mortgage instead of a 2% mortgage. And that doesn't even begin to cover the cost of things like filling the tank on your car or truck. You put on top of that safety and security. Crime is out of control across this country. 8 million people crossing the southern border. People are afraid. They're afraid for the safety of their family. And then on top of all of that, overlay the absolute disaster that is foreign policy. Biden came in and he inherited peace and prosperity. We right now have the largest land war in Europe since World War II. And Israel faced the most significant attack in 50 years. We have war in the Middle East, and every region of the world has gotten worse. And so if it were straight up based on the merits, I think the numbers would be an even bigger landslide than that, because the Biden record is terrible. It's why the Biden and the Democrats, their strategy is simple. Attack Trump, attack Trump, attack Trump. Trump is the devil is their entire campaign message. And at least these poll numbers show that people are focused on their lives, their families, their kids, and Biden and the Democrats have screwed up the policies concerning all of those.
Biden is actually out there saying Bidenomics equals the American dream. It's and no one is buying it. Let me read what David Axelrod tweeted out or posted on X in greater detail, and then I want to give you some of the economic numbers because you tell me how one overcomes these. Axelrod, it's very late to change horses. A lot will happen in the next year that no one can predict, and Biden's team says his resolve to run is firm. He's defied conventional wisdom before, but this will send tremors of doubt through the party. Not bedwetting, but legitimate concern. The greatest concern is that his biggest liability is the one thing he cannot change. Among all the unpredictables, there is one thing that is sure. The age arrow only points in one direction. Goes on to say the stakes of miscalculation here are too dramatic to ignore. Only Joe Biden can make this decision. If he continues to run, he will be the nominee. What he needs to decide is whether that is wise, whether it is in his best interest or the country's. Yes, there's risk associated with changing course now, as there is little time left for a primary campaign. But there is a lot of leadership talent in the Democratic Party poised to emerge. No leader can emerge from the Democratic Party, Senator, who's going to change this economy. The money was already spent recklessly, and despite many warnings that we couldn't afford it. That's in large part what drove these inflation numbers. The opening up drilling from this point to next year is not going to materially change the economic numbers either. The other thing that Joe Biden did, his over-reliance on renewables, which is a failing industry, with the refusal to allow drill, the influx of immigration across the southern border. No Democrat is going to be able to somehow become the nominee and overcome all that. And I will say one more thing before I give you the floor. The economy, by a margin of 59 to 37. 59 to 37. voters trust Trump over Biden on the economy. The largest gap of any issue. The gap, the preference for Trump spanned the electorate among men and women, both of them, among those with a college degree and those without. Every single age range and every single income level. Nearly 2 times as many voters said economic issues will determine their vote in 2024, as will social issues. And these economic voters favor Trump by, quote, a landslide, that's the Times' word, 60% to 32%. He's winning over Joe Biden by nearly 30 percentage points on those who say economic issues will determine their vote. And there are way more of those than there are any other kind of voters, Senator. This is devastating.
Well, it is. And let me make 2 observations on that. Number one, you can see Axelrod saying, well, Biden's biggest liability is his age. Well, that's actually not correct. Look, is Joe Biden too old? Absolutely. Is he too mentally diminished to do the job? Absolutely. But that's not why his numbers are as bad as they are. If Kamala Harris were the nominee, her numbers would be worse. His biggest liability is that his agenda has failed. But look, Axelrod can't say that, because that criticism is true of Chuck Schumer and every other Democrat senator that voted party line in favor of the disastrous Biden agenda. So they've got to say it's about his being too old. But look, as you noted, the poll numbers, you have a majority of voters who say their life is worse off because of Biden. That's not his age. That's failed policies. And the economic voters, you remember James Carville famously said, it's the economy, stupid. Well, life has gotten much harder for virtually every American across the country, other than tech billionaires and those in positions of power. Lobbyists in Washington are doing great, but working men and women are hurting. Second observation. The fact that it's Axelrod saying this is a big deal. Listen, I'm asked all the time in Texas and all across the country, who's really running things in the White House? Obviously, it's not Biden. I agree with it that it's not Biden. I think at this point, the most likely candidate is Barack Obama, that I think Barack Obama is pulling the strings, has been making the decision, has been behind this huge lurch to the left. And Axelrod is basically Obama's right hand. And what I see this Axelrod tweet as is manifesting that Democrats are getting scared. And something, Megyn, that I predicted 3 months ago on my podcast. As you know, I do a podcast 3 days a week, Verdict with Ted Cruz. It's a lot of fun, and the podcast format, as you know well, it's a great format because you can really talk about what's happening. 3 months ago on the Verdict podcast, and by the way, you ought to subscribe to the Verdict podcast and subscribe to Megyn. Listen to us both. But on the Verdict podcast, I predicted 3 months ago, I said the chances are rising dramatically that the Democrats at their convention next summer will dump Joe Biden and parachute in Michelle Obama as the nominee. And I think that would be incredibly dangerous. I don't want to see that happen, but I don't want people to be caught by surprise if and when they do that. And I think Axelrod's step today has just increased the chances of that significantly.
Okay, that's very interesting because amazingly, according to this poll and the New York Times' own analysis of its poll, a generic Democrat and Kamala Harris, even Kamala Harris, both fare better than Joe Biden does overall, particularly with Black and Hispanic voters. They made the point, I think, on today's New York Times podcast, The Daily. If Joe Biden simply won over the voters who currently support Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, but who do not support Joe Biden over Donald Trump, all of his problems with young Black and Latino voters would go away. Quote, this is a Joe Biden problem. That's at least how the left is looking at it based on this poll. And Michelle Obama is certainly more popular than Kamala Harris, and certainly with those groups that I just was ticking off. So she could be a solution, but you and I both know she hates politics. I mean, the odds of Michelle Obama at this point in her career wanting to get in and save the country from Donald Trump, which, so far she's shown no desire to do, are pretty slim. Am I wrong?
Look, I pray you're right. And I think that's the one thing that might save us from that scenario is maybe Michelle says no, she won't do it. I will note it is a different proposition. She obviously didn't run for president this time around. I don't think she has any desire to spend 2 years campaigning for president. It's a different proposition if you're looking at a convention in the summer that the Democrats are going to hand you the nomination. You've got just a couple of months of campaigning and then the general election, and suddenly you wake up and you're president. I don't know that she'll say no to that. There are very few people, I think, that would say no to that. Maybe she will. I hope she does. And let me give you my reasoning why I think Michelle is the greatest threat. I think most Democrats recognize that Kamala Harris is a deeply flawed candidate, that she's her numbers nationally, she's very unpopular. She's managed to screw up just about every issue that's given to her, including like Biden named her the border czar, which was not a favor to her. He was not doing it because he liked her. And she's completely made a mess of our southern border. I think a lot of Democrats recognize, okay, Kamala would be a really problematic nominee. Now, here's the challenge if you're a Democrat. If you push Kamala aside for somebody else, and in particular, if you push Kamala aside for a white guy like Gavin Newsom, I think the Democrats in their party would face a revolt from their party that would be utterly destructive. I don't think they are physically capable of doing that, and it's why Michelle Obama has such a powerful appeal, because she's the one Democrat who could push Kamala Harris aside and not cause a civil war within the Democrat Party. And she also, as First Lady, has a degree of Teflon where she's got very high positives. She largely stayed out of partisan fights as First Lady. Now, listen, I think she's to the left of Obama and she's to the left of Biden. But she's got much more of a shield of being seen with the favorable views most first ladies are seen as. And so I think if I were a Democrat strategist, I'd be all over this approach if she's willing to do it. And I guarantee you there are hundreds of top Democrats having this conversation today as they're looking at these poll numbers.
They're on their hands and knees begging her right now as we speak. Couple more pieces from the Times. 2% of voters in these critical swing states, 2% believe the economy is excellent. Voters under 30, a group that strongly supported Biden in 2020, said they trusted Trump more on the economy by an extraordinary 28 percentage points. My God, voters under 30, Senator, unbelievable. Less than 1% of poll respondents under 30 said the economy is excellent. 0% in Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin believe that. 0 believe that. Here's a couple more. Voters under 30 favor Joe Biden by 1 percentage point. Oh, okay. Well, he's winning. He was winning by more than 20 points in 2020. He's lost 20% with the young. Women still favor Joe Biden, but barely. That huge suburban contingent you just referred to has evaporated. Yep. Men prefer Trump by 2 times as large a margin. So even if there is a tiny margin with the women, the men's preference for Trump is crushing it. It wipes it entirely out, but it's barely there to begin with the women. Hispanic voters, Joe Biden's lead is down to single digits. In 2020, he won with more than 60%. 60%. Now his lead is down to single digits. Black voters, Joe Biden won 90% of the black vote in 2020. Now Trump is registering 22% support. 22%. Quote, a level unseen in presidential politics for a Republican in modern times. So that means, 78% for supporting Joe Biden, down from 90. In fact, they go on to say the more diverse the swing state, the farther Mr. Biden was behind. He led only in the whitest of the 6 swing states, quote, a remarkable sign of a gradual racial realignment between the two parties. It's so interesting, Senator, because what has Joe Biden done other than obsess over identity politics and race for the past 3 years? And the answer from Hispanic and Black voters is, we don't care. We want the economy to improve. We want you to do better at the border. We want you to actually lead and not focus on our skin color.
Well, I think there are at least 2 things going on there. One, for young people. Look, a lot of young people, most young people, have never seen inflation. Inflation hadn't existed for the last 20 years. They didn't know what it was like to see the cost of everything go up. That they assumed that inflation stayed at 1% and 2% forever. They assumed mortgage rates were normal at 2.5%. You suddenly have, let's say you've got a 25, 30-year-old, maybe they're buying their first house. The house you can buy is about half as big as the house you could have bought 4 years ago. That's the difference between a 2.6% mortgage and an 8% mortgage, and they're getting hit in the face with that. They're getting hit in the face if you're out working and you're having a hard time filling your gas tank, you're having a hard time paying bills. That is a reality that young people have never confronted before. when you talk about the African-American vote and the Hispanic vote, there is a major political realignment that's been happening for the past 10 years. And there are two demographic trends that are cross-cutting. One is blue-collar voters are moving to the right. That's moving Midwestern states much more Republican. The other is that suburban women have been moving to the left. That's been moving big suburban states in a more Democrat direction. What you're seeing with many of the African-American and Hispanic voters is they're getting killed economically. And for example, 8 million illegal immigrants in this country, a record high that Joe Biden has let in addition to all of the safety issues, all of the crime issues, which impact low-income neighborhoods more, those illegal immigrants are also competing for jobs with legal immigrants, with many people in the Hispanic community, many people in the African-American community who are finding their lives made significantly worse. And the Democrat Party no longer cares, I believe, about blue-collar workers. I think with Barack Obama, they made a conscious decision. There were two traditional favored children of the Democrat Party. There were union workers on one hand, and there were California environmentalist billionaires on the other. And Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and now Joe Biden made the decision to go with the California environmentalist billionaires. They wanted the money more and basically screw the union workers, that they trusted the union bosses would deliver their votes, and so to heck with their jobs. And I got to say, I think the single best thing about the Trump presidency, which I enthusiastically supported, is that the Republican Party is becoming more and more a blue-collar party. And that's manifested with working people. That's manifested with Hispanics and African Americans. And it is a generational shift in our political world.
Mm-hmm. The numbers are Joe Biden's advantage in urban areas is only 1/2 of Trump's advantage in rural areas.
Yep.
So those city blocks that Joe Biden so depends on for his electoral hopes, it is shrinking. The support for him there is shrinking. And Trump's advantage in the rural areas of America is only growing. He's amassing more and more, not to mention suburban areas. College-educated and non-college educated voters across all income levels say Joe Biden's policies have hurt them personally. As I said, Trump's have helped them, and it's by almost exactly reciprocal numbers. They gave Trump a 17-point advantage for having helped them. They gave Biden an 18-point disadvantage for having hurt them. This is truly disastrous. I mean, this is what makes David Axelrod tweet the way he did. Other issues, immigration, Trump over Biden by 12 points. National security, Trump over Biden by 12 points. Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and this poll was taken after it started. It was taken between October 22nd and November 3rd. Trump over Biden by 11 points. Abortion and democracy are the only two issues on which Joe Biden leads. Abortion by 9 points, democracy, whatever that means, by 3 points. Even Senator Cruz on temperament, right? This has been Trump's biggest Achilles heel all along. 46% of voters say Joe Biden has the proper temperament, just 46, not even half the electorate believes it. That's barely higher than the 43% who say Trump has the proper temperament. They're almost tied on temperament. This is what the Dems are now saying. I saw it on Morning Joe. I saw it in the New York Times. I heard it on the Daily. It's a long way off. It's a year away. And Joe Biden had terrible approval numbers when they went into the midterms in 2022, and the Dems still won bigger than had been expected. And by the time we get to November 2024, Trump will have had 3 or 4 of the criminal trials will have been completed or will be underway. And at that point, he's going to be a convicted felon. Mark our words, he's going to be a convicted felon, and the American people will not vote for a convicted felon, which, frankly, could be true, but here's some data. The New York Times, Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman have a piece saying, if the former president is convicted and sentenced, around 6% of voters across Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, those same swing states, say they would switch their votes to Mr. Biden. So there it is. In black and white, the electoral strategy, back to Trump's claims of electoral interference, it's right there, black and white. They're ace in the hole.
Well, it is naked what the Democrats are doing, which is they're abusing the justice system to try to defeat their principal political opponent. And I think these indictments are garbage. I think they're going to be overturned on appeal. But I agree with you. There's a very significant risk of jury convictions, and I think the appeal won't happen until after Election Day. And the Democrats are doing this. Number one, I think they recognize that the indictments help Trump in the primary. His numbers go up. Every time he's indicted, his numbers in the primary go up. But I think the Democrats believe that these indictments, when they become convictions, will hurt him in the general. I don't know if that's true or not. This is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. Now, this is the kind of weaponization of the justice system that we see in banana republics. I think a lot of people understand that they're trying to destroy their political opponents instead of beating them at the polls. And ironically, why are the Democrats doing this? Because they don't trust democracy. You know, you mentioned those democracy numbers, which has become a talking point for woke lefties about we defend democracy, except when it comes to the presidential election, where they don't trust the voters and they want to try to put the other candidate in jail in order to stop the voters from not voting for their guy. I mean, it really is contempt for democracy that characterizes this Biden Justice Department. And I'll tell you, Megyn, all of this is discussed in my new book, which is coming out tomorrow. As you noted, the book is entitled Unwoke: How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. And it describes how the radical left has seized every major institution of our nation and is weaponizing it. And the book explains why it happened, how it happened. But critically, it also lays out common sense steps we can take to fight back and take our institutions back.
I mean, it's the only glimmer of hope in the Israeli situation that people here are waking up to the dangers of this woke agenda being pushed at colleges and beyond. Let's face it, the DEI programs in corporate America and beyond too, they're pernicious and they have real world effects that we're seeing with our own eyes, Senator. It's manifesting on the streets of America. I'll show you this. I mentioned in the intro, this is a montage of protests at the White House over the weekend, Saturday night, where they're yelling Allahu Akbar as they try to scale the White House fence. Watch this.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Genocide Joe! Genocide Joe!
Let's go with genocide!
America wants Palestine free! What the fuck you mean? America wants Palestine free! America, don't stand with Israel! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
I'm sorry, but there's something chilling about hearing that call, which the 9/11 terrorists were screaming as they flew those planes into the Trade Center right outside of our White House, seeing our White House within steps of these fanatics who invariably have come out of these college campus indoctrination programs.
Well, look, that is exactly right. And this is a manifestation of the radicalism that has seized our institutions. The reason I wrote the book Unwoke is many of us look at the country and we're wondering, what the hell happened? We look at these images, we're like, how did we get to this point? And in the book, I wanted to explain it. And it starts with chapter 1 is universities, which I call the Wuhan lab of the woke virus. It's where the virus was created, it's where it mutated, and it's where it spread. And what happened starting in the 1960s and 70s is that Marxists took over our college faculties, took over our college administrations. And Marxism, Karl Marx laid out a fundamental conflict that we are irredeemably in a conflict between oppressors and victims. And he based it on socioeconomic divide. So the oppressors were the owners of capital, and the victims were the workers, the proletariat. And Marx's solution, what Marxists call for, is the violent revolution by the proletariat to overthrow their oppressors and use government to forcibly redistribute to the victims. And what I then describe is how it began in universities and it spread to take over just about every other major institution in America. So it went from universities to the next chapter is K through 12 elementary and high school education. From there, it went to journalism. From there to big business, to big tech, to entertainment, to Hollywood, movies, TV, sports, music, to science. And if you look at what cultural Marxists do is they use the Marxist lens and they apply it to cultural factors. So instead of looking at socioeconomic divides, they use race, and that's where you get critical race theory, that the answer is to tear down the oppressors and forcibly redistribute to the victims. When it comes to gender and gender ideology, again, they apply it to those issues and the radical transgender agenda. And, a couple of weeks ago, I was sitting down with a very successful tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley who leans quite left. And he was expressing befuddlement, bewilderment at the radical anti-Semitism and blatant hatred of Israel we're seeing in the Democrat Party and the Squad, we're seeing on college campuses and universities. And he said he didn't understand where this came from. And my response is, this is the direct result of the cultural Marxist, because for the cultural Marxists, they have coded Jews as oppressors. And they have coded the Palestinians as victims. And so their solution is the violent revolutionary overthrow of the oppressors and government redistributing. And that's why you see now in the White House, they're chanting from the river to the sea, which is what Hamas chants. That means from the Jordan River to the ocean. That is a call for eliminating the state of Israel, for killing every one of the Jews.
According to Rashida Tlaib, that's just an aspirational call. It's just a little inspo. I think we have it. Do we not? Do we have Rashida Tlaib on here? In any event, she was out there saying it's just aspirational. That's all it is. If we have it, let's play it.
We stand with Israel.
This is the video she posted with it. Stand by.
Mr. President, the American people are not with you on this one.
Innocent civilians are going to be hurt going forward. I wish I could tell you something different. I wish that wasn't going to happen, but it is going to happen.
I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support.
We will remember in 2024.
And then it reads, Joe Biden supported the genocide of the Palestinian people. The American people won't forget. This is her. Biden supported ceasefire now. This is her video. Or don't count us in 2024. And then she tweeted, Senator, from the river to the sea is an aspirational call for freedom, human rights, and peaceful coexistence, not death, destruction, or hate. It's strange because I heard it being used by Hamas as they were murdering children. Yeah. So it didn't really seem like a peaceful call to me, but, she might know better than I.
Well, look, Megyn, you're exactly right. And you've also seen the video right after the October 7th massacre, where Rashida Tlaib was walking down the hallway in the Capitol, and a reporter asked, what are your views on Hamas targeting innocent civilians, raping and murdering women and little girls, murdering infants, burning them alive? And she refused to answer. And understand, for the cultural Marxist, and Rashida Tlaib is the embodiment of cultural Marxism, violent revolution is what they support. She refused to condemn. It ought to be real simple to say, do not target civilians. This is grotesque. This is evil. This is wrong. But she won't do that. And for the left, the people on college campuses, look at Harvard, my alma mater, 35 student groups signed a statement saying all of the violence is 100% Israel's fault. They have been brainwashed. They have been indoctrinated. And so the book, Unwoke, is designed, number one, to explain what happened and how it happened. But number two, to lay out concrete steps to fight back, to take our institutions back. So, for example, there's a chapter on big business. And a decade ago, it would have been unimaginable that the Fortune 100 was operating as the economic enforcement arm for the radical left. That's what we have been seeing now as big business cancels people, fires people, censors people, has gone fully woke. And yet, in the chapter on big business, I do a deep dive into what happened with Bud Light, and what happened with Target, and you look at Bud Light, I don't think there's been a brand in modern times that has lit itself on fire as much as Bud Light, where you had these woke left-wing marketing executives who looked down on their customers. They thought their customers were ignorant rubes, and they ridiculed and insulted them. And Bud Light was the number one selling beer in America. It dropped out of the top 10. They lost nearly $30 billion in market value. And what's interesting, right after Bud Light happened, Target occurred. And you look at Target, which lots of people go to buy inexpensive quality goods. And Target decided that wasn't their mission. Their mission was to become the front line of the transgender culture wars. And so they had huge displays in the front of the store pushing LGBT items on young people, on kids.
Tuck-it bathing suits, women's bathing suits where you could tuck a penis into them, which is unnecessary for any woman.
And by the way, those bathing suits were marketed to 2- and 3-year-olds. It's literally a 3-year-old boy to tuck your genitals in.
They deny it, but it's true. We just documented it on Friday with the swim skirt that is being pushed on boys who want to dress like girls at the pool.
And what happened so powerfully is millions of moms came in and saw this and got pissed off. And Target likewise lost tens of billions of dollars. Now, here's what's really encouraging. If you look at the conversations of the Target executives, what they were saying right at the outset of this scandal is, oh, dear God, we don't want to become like Bud Light. That is a powerful indication. Look, the problem, why did corporate America go woke? Because the cost and benefit was imbalanced. That a rational CEO, it was easier to give in to the woke mob than to try to resist them. And so they did that over and over again. And I think what we are seeing is changing the cost and benefits. I don't want corporations getting involved in politics on my side. I want them to stay the hell out and sell their widgets. Like go, when you go to Target, you want to get cheap, decent goods for your house. You want to buy a big box of detergent. You don't want their politics jammed down on your children. And I do think the more we can change the cost-benefit analysis, the more we can take these institutions back.
Mm-hmm. I swear it's so offensive to have to see that sort of a male attempt at co-opting womanhood in your face as you walk into Target to get art supplies. It's no wonder that there was backlash to that group. And the CEO was on CNBC on Friday trying to downplay it. Wrong. He lied even there but it's to your point. Maybe it's good he feels the need to lie because he realized he stepped in it. Senator Cruz stays with us. Buy his book, Unwoke. Very few have the power with the word things the way Ted Cruz does. I think you'll really enjoy it because he knows how to tell a story. Talks about his dad in Cuba and some mistakes he made when he came here to the United States, about believing in Fidel Castro, only to learn the hard way that he wasn't as great as he thought. Some very really revealing anecdotes in there, and Senator Cruz stays with us after this break, so don't go away. Thanksgiving is just 2 weeks away, which means the best Genucel sale of the year, just in time for the holidays. The Genucel Most Popular Package is back for you to look stunning at your Thanksgiving gatherings. Get it now. Now you can get the brand new Genucel 3, also included in the Most Popular Package. Sunny from Rockford, Illinois wrote in saying, I will give Genucel 5 stars because the products do exactly what they promised. It's working. I love all the products and I highly recommend it. Take advantage of the Genucel Best Sale of the Year and say goodbye to fine lines, crow's feet, bags and puffiness, laugh lines, and dark spots. The Genucel experience is like no other. Look and feel your absolute best or your money back, no questions asked. Go to Genucel.com/MK60 for an incredible holiday discount, better than 70% off on Genucel's Most Popular Package with the Genucel 3 and the Dark Spot Corrector. And for results in 12 hours or less, the Immediate Effects product is included free. Genucel.com/MK60 for a free upgrade to priority shipping at checkout. GENUCEL.com/MK60. Back with me now, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Well, technically, he's U.S. Senator from Texas. Ted Cruz, his new book is out tomorrow. It's called Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. You've heard that term bandied about. This book defines it, contextualizes it, explains it, and shows you how it's infested the United States in a way only Ted Cruz could do. I mean, not only is he an expert on this, but he used to be the Solicitor General. He's argued all sorts of cases before the Supreme Court. He's become a U.S. Senator. He's got a top podcast. He's a busy man, but he wants you to understand this message because it's an important one. One of the problems in creating the spread of this problem, this pernicious virus that created in the college campuses, as you say, like the virus in Wuhan, is the media and its assistance on these messages. And there's no better example of that today than ABC News and its chief White House correspondent. You're not going to believe this. Called to my attention on Twitter by Molly Hemingway of The Federalist. And this is how Molly put it when she retweeted this picture. Molly says, if you're trained to notice subtleties, you can detect an ever so slight difference in how corporate media talk about left-wing protests versus right-wing ones. And this from Mary Bruce, again, chief White House correspondent for ABC, reads, the White House gates this morning after passionate protests over the weekend, showing the gates leading onto the White House grounds covered in what we know is fake blood and the handprints of those rowdy, obnoxious, pro-Palestinian protesters who were trying to scale the White House fence with their Palestinian flags. They're very passionate, Senator, very passionate. I'm going to guess they're not going to have the FBI showing up at their houses or wind up on a no-fly list like some of the passionate insurrectionists, according to ABC, who participated on January 6th.
Well, there is one of the most important chapters in the book Unwoke is the chapter on journalism, because I think journalism has been fundamentally destroyed. I think Donald Trump broke the media. And go back a decade ago. So a decade ago, you take a network like CNN. I used to go on CNN all the time. I'd go on CNN about once a week. And CNN a decade ago, they wanted to be journalists. If you asked them, they aspired to be journalists. And they viewed it as part of their job to present both sides, to be even-handed, to cover the news. Now, they were terrible at it. They leaned hard left. but that was an objective that they were legitimately aspiring to. So I would go on literally once a week on CNN. When Trump became president, it shattered the brain of the corporate media. CNN is a garbage network. They don't aspire to cover both sides. They have a panel of 5 people. Let's all discuss how Donald Trump is the devil. And that's the only view. They view their role now as propagandists, that they're not just advocates and they're not just Democrats. They are the left wing of the Democrat Party. So on my podcast, Verdict, we did an episode a couple of weeks ago that was entitled, CNN is Hamas's Air Force. So is MSNBC, so is ABC. And we played about a dozen different clips of their coverage. And this is not just incidental. This is actually an integral part of Hamas's strategy. Hamas knows they're not strong enough to defeat Israel. So, for example, and Rashida Tlaib played the White House saying there will be civilian casualties. Tragically, we know that. Why? Because Hamas wants there to be civilian casualties. They use human shields of Palestinians. They put their headquarters in the basement of a Palestinian hospital. They put rockets and missiles in kindergartens in Gaza because they know Israel only targets military targets. They go to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties, more than any military on the face of the planet. But Hamas wants dead Palestinian women, dead Palestinian babies, because they know the corporate media will use those images, amplify them, and use them to demonize Israel. And that's an integral part of their strategy. It is also why, if you look at the Democrats and you say, why did they go so extreme? Why do they embrace things like abolishing the police or open borders or genital mutilation surgeries for 8-year-olds? I mean, those are really loopy, out there positions. They're 90-10 issues where they're on the wrong side. The reason why Democrats embrace them now is because journalism is so broken that they know they'll never be asked about them. They'll never be held to account. And so the politicization and radicalization of the news media has made Democrats captive to the radical left, where Democrats in Congress are much more worried about being primaried from the left than they are about losing in the general election, because the media no longer actually even tries to be journalists. And I think that's terrible. Listen, I have defended many times people who criticize me all the time. You have a right to criticize me. That's free speech. I believe in democracy. I believe in free speech. The left does not anymore, and the consequences, the chapter on journalism, I think, is really significant because it is causing much of the radicalism in so many other institutions.
I mean, I was glad to see finally in the New York Times a piece on November 3rd calling attention to the fact that one of the reasons they can't get people out of Gaza, you know, the humanitarian exit of, let's say, dual U.S. citizens / Israeli passport holders who have found themselves over there, is because Hamas keeps trying to put its wounded soldiers on the innocent, injured Palestinian lists. And Israel and international authorities are checking these lists before they let people leave. And they keep trying to put their terrorists on the list. And thankfully, Israel is checking it, saying, no, we have enough intel to know who that guy is and who that guy is. But you don't hear Angelina Jolie tweeting about that.
Nope.
Right? She's only talking about how it's you know, we're bombing innocent civilians without any care for life. There needs to be a ceasefire, collective punishment. Why don't you put the blame where it belongs? Because she's wrapped up, she's a UN person, in all this same stuff.
Look, the UN hates Israel. They are anti-Semitic. The Hollywood left hates Israel. They're anti-Semitic. My whole chapter in Hollywood talks about the same thing, how they are viciously pushing an agenda that is Marxism. And some people may think, gosh, Marxism, that seems extreme. It is, listen, when it comes to, for me, Marxism is not something abstract. It is real and personal. You know, you talked about how I opened the book. I opened the book telling my family story, that my father fought in the Cuban Revolution. He fought in Cuba. When he was 14 and 15 years old, he was fighting alongside Castro. And he was imprisoned. He was tortured in Cuba, and he fled Cuba. He came to America. And my dad has said, he said, the revolution in Cuba, it consisted almost entirely of 14 and 15-year-old boys who didn't know any better. And Marxists always start with the children. This is true in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Russia, in China. Everywhere you have Marxists in power, they start with the children, because children and teenagers, they're naive, they're idealistic, they're easily deceived. They have no life experience. And a story that I tell right at the outset of the book also is a story my grandmother, my abuela, told me. She was a 6th grade teacher. And she said when Castro took over, very early on, they sent the soldiers into the elementary schools. And the soldiers would go into kindergartens and first grades. And they'd tell all the students, they'd say, close your eyes and pray to God and pray for candy. And the kids all did so, and they opened their eyes, and there was no candy. Then the soldiers would say, close your eyes and pray to Fidel Castro for candy. And while the kids' eyes were closed, the soldiers quietly slipped a piece of candy on each one of their desks. That is Marxism. That is inherent in Marxism. They want to destroy your allegiance to everything except the state. They want to destroy your allegiance to God. It's why they hate religion so powerfully. They want to destroy your allegiance to family, to your parents, to your kids. It's why they encourage kids to rat out their parents. And if you see the cultural Marxists today, they are coming after the family unit. And take something like Black Lives Matter. Let's connect it again to what's happening right here today. Black Lives Matter, the institutions. Look, the phrase Black Lives Matter is unequivocally true. It is a truism. Absolutely yes, period, full stop. The organization Black Lives Matter, Inc., which is actually an incorporated organization, was founded by avowed Marxists, by trained Marxist organizers. And they're vicious racists, but they're also viciously anti-Semitic. One of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter has called, going back for more than a decade, has called for the destruction of the state of Israel. Now, here's an interesting connection. When we had the Black Lives Matter riots across the country, we saw a bunch of big corporations give millions and millions of dollars to these Marxists. And so on my podcast, Verdict, I went through and I listed the corporations like Apple and Amazon and Coca-Cola. And I said, do you support this anti-Semitic Marxist organization that calls for the destruction of Israel? Now listen to this, Megyn. It's interesting. That podcast episode I released on October 18th. The next day, Coca-Cola deleted all of the references on its website to the $500,000 that it had given to Black Lives Matter because they wanted to escape accountability. Now, that shows the interconnection of all this, but it also shows how we change it and take it back. That when you hold them accountable and shine a light on them, that's how you make it, you increase the costs of going woke.
See, what you failed to understand was those two were merely passionate protests. That's what those were. They were passionate. They weren't violent. No one got hurt. Not like the awful J6 riot insurrection. Okay, totally different. Senator Ted Cruz stays with us. We're going to get to a personal story. I've got one that matches his when it comes to the attempts to indoctrinate the children first. It sounds like both of our daughters have gone through something very similar. That's next. More with Senator Ted Cruz in 1 minute, author of the great new book, Unwoke. Check it out now. Support Senator Ted Cruz, and he's got solutions in there to undo this madness, solutions that are very timely. Don't go away. You can go to bed thinking about it and wake up thinking about it. High interest credit cards and loans make it nearly impossible to pay off your debt. And insane inflation keeps you stuck paycheck to paycheck. The system traps you in debt. Donewithdebt.com can be a lifeline. I've talked about my own experience with debt in the past after I got out of law school. What a mess I was. Well, donewithdebt.com has a new strategy to help people like me, the way I was, to help erase your debt faster and easier than you thought possible. Here's what they can do for you. Analyze all the debt options you qualify for, minimize your interest rates, cut medical bills, and reduce debt without bankruptcy and without a loan. But you do need to hurry. Some debt solutions are time sensitive. Go to donewithdebt.com. Find out how easy they make it and find out if it's right for you. That's donewithdebt.com, donewithdebt, DEBT.com. First, I want to get to something important that's happening to all of us, and that is as we watch the increase in severity of this Mideast conflict, we're watching an increase in the terror warnings to those of us here at home. And a lot of folks missed Christopher Wray, the FBI director's testimony before Congress last week, but Senator Ted Cruz was not one of them. He had some dire warnings. I don't think I'm overstating the case when he was talking about the increase in terrorism threats right here to the homeland. Here's a bit of what he said.
The reality is that the terrorism threat has been elevated throughout 2023, but the ongoing war in the Middle East has raised the threat of an attack against Americans in the United States to a whole nother level. We assess that the actions of Hamas and its allies will serve as an inspiration, the likes of which we haven't seen since ISIS launched its so-called caliphate several years ago. In just the past few weeks, multiple foreign terrorist organizations have called for attacks against Americans and the West. We also cannot and do not discount the possibility that Hamas or another foreign terrorist organization may exploit the current conflict to conduct attacks here on our own soil.
So the threat of terrorism here in the United States is at a whole nother level, is how he put it, as a result of this conflict. Maybe that will sink into the head of these people who are out there trying to tear down the posters of the Israeli hostages, saying it's all propaganda. It didn't happen. We're pro-Hamas, LGBTQ crowd for Hamas. They have no clue what they're stirring up. But I know this caught your eye too, Christopher Wray's warning, which was in rather stark terms for him.
Well, it was. And listen, let me just say at the outset here that I think we are at a greater risk today of a major terrorist attack in the United States than we've been at any point since September 11th. And tragically, I think we're living on borrowed time. And it's a combination of two things. Number one, the war in the Middle East. And to be clear, Joe Biden has funded this war. He sent over $100 billion to Iran. And Iran is the leading state sponsor of terrorism. Iran is funding Hamas. Iran funds Hezbollah. And Obama before him sent $100 billion to Iran. They are providing the capital that is funding the death squads, that is funding the rockets. But when you combine that with the utter chaos of our southern border, more than 8 million illegal immigrants. I was down at the southern border 2 weeks ago. I went out on midnight patrol with the Border Patrol agents, which I do frequently. Every one of those agents is concerned about terrorists coming across the southern border. And we've seen in the last year, the number of individuals on the terror watch list apprehended at the border is more than the previous 6 years combined. And it's an order of magnitude. It's much, much, much more. But that's actually not the number that concerns me. The number that concerns me is 2 million. 2 million is the number of gotaways. Those are the people that the Border Patrol knows about, but they didn't apprehend. And the reason is the people who turn themselves into the Border Patrol agents, those are the main apprehensions Biden has. The gotaways tend to be criminals. They're murderers. They're rapists. They're child molesters. They tend to be gang members affiliated with MS-13 or other gangs, or terrorists. And I'll tell you, the Customs and Border Patrol in San Diego informed its agents in writing to be on guard for terrorists from Hamas, from Hezbollah, and from Palestinian Islamic Jihad crossing our southern border and pretending they're not from those terrorist organizations. And I think Joe Biden has essentially issued an invitation for these terrorists to come to America. And I think every American, our lives and safety are seriously compromised. I pray we do not see the kind of violence Israel has experienced, that horrific terrorist violence. I pray we do not see it in America. But every day Biden leaves the southern border open is a day the chances increase more and more.
It's not just us. France and Belgium have both raised their terror alert levels. Europe's looking at this problem, maybe even more so than the United States, given the number of Muslims that have immigrated to those countries over the past 10 plus years, as they've had an open border situation in places like Germany too. It's something a lot of countries are going to need to take a look at. And we've seen attacks in France of a woman in her home. There's been a rising list of Jews who've gotten attached, innocent people sitting in their homes. It's dark. You mentioned Obama. Unbelievably, he chose not just to weigh in via tweet and then statement the other day, but he went on Pod Save America, which is his old buddies who helped work on his in his White House, their podcast, and actually tried to blame what's happening in the Middle East, not on himself, that would be totally appropriate, but on all of us. We're all complicit. Listen to this, Senator.
If there's any chance of us being able to act constructively to do something, it will require an admission of complexity and maintaining what on the surface may seem contradictory ideas. That what Hamas did was horrific and there's no justification for it. And what is also true is that the occupation and what's happening to Palestinians is unbearable. That all of us are complicit to some degree. I look at this and I think back, what could I have done during my presidency to move this forward as hard as I tried? I've got the scars to prove it. But there's a part of me that's still saying, well, was there something else I could have done?
Gee, Senator, could you help him out?
What utter and complete bullshit. Was there something else you could have done? Here's an idea. Don't give $100 billion to the monsters who are committing these massacres. Barack Obama led the effort to flood cash into Iran. The Ayatollah in Iran leads mobs chanting death to America and death to Israel. They want to commit mass murder. They want to eliminate the state of Israel. They want to murder every Jew. Hamas, more than 90% of the funding of Hamas comes from Iran. Hezbollah, more than 90% of the funding from Hezbollah comes from Iran. Barack Obama funded them. And then you listen, he says, well, what Hamas did was indefensible and there's no justification for it. But let me give a justification for it. And he then says He actually uses the same line that the radicals at Harvard did. And of course, Barack Obama is a graduate of the Harvard Law School, just a few years ahead of me. And his justification, he says, the occupation is unbearable. What occupation? This is a lie, and it's a lie the radical left pushes. Gaza is not occupied. Israel left Gaza. Israel gave Gaza to the Palestinians, said it's all yours. Israel doesn't govern Gaza. Israel doesn't control Gaza. Gaza is run by Hamas. Hamas is in charge of Gaza. There is zero occupation in Gaza of anyone other than the Palestinians. And why is Gaza such a miserable place with so much poverty? Because all they care about is their vicious racist hatred of Jews. And so internationally, billions of dollars have flooded into Gaza. And what happens? Hamas takes that money, the money that could go to building schools, to building hospitals, and they use it to build weapons of war to attack and kill Jews. They get money for water pipes to have clean water for Palestinian children. And what do they do instead? They cut the water pipes into rockets and they fill them with explosives to murder Jews. And go back a couple of weeks ago. Do you remember the story that the corporate media broadcast all over the world, which is that Israel bombs a Palestinian hospital, murders 500 Palestinians? We now know that was an utter and complete lie. It was a lie that was spread by Hamas. And there are a couple of things going on. Number one, Israel uses precision-guided munitions. They hit what they aim at. They do not target hospitals. They target military targets. Hamas and the terrorists, they don't have guidance on their rockets. Their rockets are basically a metal tube with some propellant, an explosive, and a bunch of shrapnel, nails and ball bearings, and they fire them in the general direction of Israel and hope they explode and kill some Jews. And about 20% of the rockets that Hamas fires never make it out of Gaza. They end up exploding in Gaza and hurting Palestinians. In this instance, it was a rocket fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad that had no guidance system, so it ended up crashing in Gaza. It didn't actually hit the hospital. Turns out the hospital wasn't hit. It exploded in the parking lot outside the hospital. So it was a lie that Israel bombed it. It was a lie that the hospital was hit, and it was a lie that 500 Palestinians were killed, and yet the New York Times, CNN, the AP, Reuters, they all went with Hamas's lie. By the way, Rashida Tlaib continued repeating the lie after it had been disproven because the propaganda was part of the attack, and Barack Obama repeats those lies. Let me say it again. The Gaza Strip is not occupied. When he says the occupation is unbearable, he is repeating an anti-Semitic lie because the radical left hates Israel. Barack Obama loathes Benjamin Netanyahu. He spent 8 years undermining the government of Israel, and now Joe Biden has spent the last 3 years undermining the government of Israel because in their cultural Marxist worldview, the Israelis, the Jews are the oppressors, and they want to topple the oppressors, and they stand with the victims even as they're murdering women and children.
It is amazing to look at his struggle session. Gee, is there anything I could have done differently? Anything? You funded Iran. You tried to normalize Iran. They're the ones funding this entire thing, that entire attack against the Israelis. No responsibility whatsoever. Gee, I'll have to kick it around. Maybe if Michelle runs for president, this will come up. I want to round back to the book and the cultural Marxism, because I know you raised a story about your daughter and Columbus Day, which we just celebrated. Yeah. And I was surprised to see that you down in Texas had a similar issue to what we up here in Connecticut experienced too, which is this questioning about whether this holiday is really appropriate. At my daughter's school, she was asked by her history teacher, the entire class was, to take a position on whether Columbus Day should still be recognized or whether we should change it to Indigenous Peoples Day. And I'm happy to tell you that my daughter defended Columbus Day. I'm unhappy to tell you she was literally the only girl in the entire class that did it. The only one. And the teacher was very much on the other side. You would think if there were only one person in the class who was taking a position, you might like get excited. It's a chance to foster debate. Let's go have at it and throw our bone. That's not how it went down. So what happened in your child's class?
Well, and I describe this in my chapter on K through 12 education, how my daughter, when she was in elementary school, came back right after Columbus Day, and she was talking about Columbus, and she and her friend were both saying, oh, we hate Christopher Columbus. He's evil and a racist and committed genocide. He's terrible. And look, I'm not deeply invested in defending Christopher Columbus as a hero or anything, but I did want to have a conversation with her, and I said, well, we do have a federal holiday that's actually in the statute books named Columbus Day. Do we typically have federal holidays celebrating people that are evil, genocidal maniacs? I mean, might there be anything good about Columbus? And she was like, no, there can't be. And I said, well, look, the argument about genocide is that he came over in the 15th century and that he and the other people on the ships with them carried with them germs that ended up spreading to Native American people and killing them. And I understand that argument. Is it relevant in the 15th century? Nobody knew what a germ was, so he didn't know he was carrying those germs and nobody else did. I mean, you're accusing him of genocide. That suggests culpability, wanting to kill people. Is that relevant at all? Now, I also describe moving forward a little bit later in the year at Thanksgiving. My daughter and her friends were talking, and they said, oh, Thanksgiving is all about the Pilgrims oppressing the Native Americans and celebrating the stolen land. And I was like, well, look, the settlers came to America and there was conquest. And if you look at the history of mankind, just about every nation has been one series of conquest over the others. And by the way, the Native Americans, one tribe conquered another and one tribe conquered another. And inevitably, when you have war and you have conquest, there are stories and tragedies. And so were there tragedies, were there atrocities carried out against Native Americans? Of course. But there were atrocities on both sides of that. I said, from where do you think the verb to scalp came from? It's not like these were just noble savages who were oppressed. They were murdering on both sides, and it was war and conquest. And a point that I made to my daughter, I said, look, this discussion and the Columbus Day discussion are interconnected. And it comes down to really one fundamental question. Do you view the Western settlement of America as a good thing or a bad thing? And today's left, right, the cultural Marxists, view the formation of America, view the Constitution, view the Bill of Rights as fundamentally evil and illegitimate. Now, I think America has been the greatest force for good the world has ever seen, has produced more freedom, more prosperity, more opportunity, has liberated more captives, has lifted more people out of poverty than any nation in the history of the world. Do we have our flaws? Sure. Have we done things wrong? Of course. But I agree with Dr. Martin Luther King that the arc of justice is long and that it arcs towards justice. That is a fundamentally different view. And what I talk about in the book Unwoke is engage with your kids, have those conversations with them. And that doesn't mean you have to reflexively argue the other side, but at least try to teach them to question and have some balance and have a little bit of historical understanding rather than just being drowned by the indoctrination that so many of the kids are getting.
Yeah. And you know who shares virtually all of those same values with us? Israel. And you know who doesn't? Hamas.
Exactly
and,
right.
Frankly, most of the Palestinians, they don't share those values, who are out there getting the support of those protesters at the White House. How do you think LGBTQ rights are going to go with most of that crowd? Not particularly well. How about women? How do they fare? Not particularly well. How about rule of law? How about freedom of speech? How about freedom of religion? Okay, good luck. Go check it out. Get back to me. Senator Cruz, it's always a pleasure. The book is Unwoke. I think you'll really enjoy it. You'll get to know the senator, get to know his family better. You get to understand this issue, which we hear discussed so much in our society now, discussed in great detail, and you'll learn how to fight it.
And Megyn, I'll tell you, the book will be on sale in bookstores starting tomorrow, but it is right now today on Amazon. It is number 1, number 2, and number 3 simultaneously on the bestseller list for politics. So I would encourage you, go to Amazon right now. You can buy it today on Amazon. And it's designed to give you the tools to fight back. And it's also, as you noted, it's interesting, it's fun, it tells stories. It's not a dry academic book. It's designed to help you understand and equip you to fight back.
But here's the number one reason we should buy it and make it go to number one, because it's really going to irritate the New York Times.
Amen.
Let's get them up there to number one. They're going to have to suck it. Great to see you, Senator.
Thanks, Megyn.
All the best to you. After a crazy day of politics as usual, we all deserve an uplifting dose of plush perfection. And when I say plush perfection, I am talking about the seriously soft and incredibly comfy Cuddle Blanket from Cozy Earth. Here is why you're going to be addicted to the Cuddle Blanket. First of all, it's just amazing. It's awesome. The Cuddle Blanket is a faux fur, that's nice, faux, ultra plush pile blanket that literally wraps you in a soft, warm cocoon of pure luxury. Oh, I have one. It's like heaven on earth. You wrap it around you and the stress of the day melts away. The Cuddle Blanket is generously sized so you can easily share that warmth. And speaking of sharing, it's perfect for gifting. Everyone loves a blanket as a gift. It doesn't matter what you've earned, what you haven't earned, where you are, where you live, where you don't live. Everyone loves a Cuddle Blanket. It's double-sided. It's perfectly weighted, like a warm, comforting hug, even draped over your sofa or armchair. Its neutral color and faux fur texture adds a touch of warmth to any space. Elevate your cozy moments with the Cuddle Blanket. Hurry, save 40% off the Cuddle Blanket now. This offer will not last, so go to CozyEarth.com, enter my promo code Megyn for 40% off now. That's CozyEarth.com, promo code MEGYN. Oh, we have a sad update for you today. Way back in episode 483 in January of this year, we brought you an entire show on a topic I admittedly knew next to nothing about: the use of psychedelic drugs and psilocybin research to help treat depression, addiction, and other medical conditions. Our guest for the full show that day was Dr. Roland Griffiths, who was the expert on the topic as the director of the Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. We talked about the history of his research, the various uses, even how cancer patients had used psychedelics as therapeutics, research he pioneered. At the end of the interview, we got to the sad reveal of Roland's very personal connection to this topic. He told us that he himself had terminal colon cancer. Here's a bit of our conversation on appreciating life and practicing gratitude. Watch.
I went in for a routine screening colonoscopy, believing myself to be completely healthy. I take care of myself. I watch my diet. I exercise, and came out with, in short order, a stage 4 cancer diagnosis that's been resistant to treatment. But Megyn, the astonishing thing about this is that it's, rather than being depressed and anxious for me, I consider the whole thing to be a blessing. And it's been this just remarkable experience of joy and gratitude. I thought I was pretty awake to the joy and miracle of life before this, but it's much more so now. And so I'm moved to talk about it just because I think in principle, we can all wake up much more than we are. And I want to encourage people to do that absent a terminal diagnosis.
Roland, thank you for sharing that. My God, I feel more emotional about it than you do. We knew Roland did not have long when we brought you his story back in January. On October 16th, he passed away at his home in Baltimore at the age of 77. I'm getting emotional again. There's something about this man that was so touching. He devoted himself to this line of research, which was always considered controversial and almost taboo until Roland. And he did it at the Johns Hopkins School, of all places. And he created a place for this research, which has now helped so many. According to the New York Times, Roland was working on a paper about a study he conducted in which clergy from various faiths took psilocybin to see how it would affect their life and work. Roland took psychedelics himself shortly after his diagnosis to investigate his own condition. What did he learn? You will die, he said, but everything is absolutely perfect. He said this to the New York Times at the time. There's meaning and purpose to this that goes beyond your understanding. But how you're managing that is exactly how you should manage it. Roland, now gone from this physical world, but his important work and legacy live on. You can find more information and donate if you'd like to at Griffiths, that's with a TH at the end, griffithsfund.org. Joining me now is someone who knows a thing or two about what psychedelics can do to improve and even save your life. We're going to get to that. Jordan Belfort. Jordan is a former stockbroker, entrepreneur, speaker, author, and most famously, the Wolf of Wall Street. Jordan was last on the show in 2021 in episode 182. We're so happy to have him back. He has a new book out called The Wolf of Investing, My Insider's Playbook for Making a Fortune on Wall Street, which he did very well. Jordan, great to have you back. I'm so sad that we lost this great man, but I just thought it would be a good way to get into you because you've been very open about, you had to go to jail, you served time. We talked all about it in your last time on the show, but you also were an addict and found yourself using Suboxone, which so many addicts use to get off of opioids. It's like a light opioid, but it's not as catastrophic for your life as these others, and it's helped a lot of people in their addiction. But you couldn't get off of Suboxone. And then you discovered the world of psychedelics. And this is, Roland would be sure to tell everybody, you should do this at a clinic under the care of a physician. This isn't something like you go pick a mushroom in your backyard and give it a try. Right. But I know you've said they really helped you. Yeah, well, I mean, I went to Mexico. It's not legal here still. Hopefully it's on the cusp of there starting to certain states you can use it. But I went to Mexico, to Cancun, and I took a medicine called ibogaine, which is like the granddaddy of hallucinogens. And it's a tough experience. It's long. It's about 12 hours, but it completely broke any dependency I had on opioids. And just shocks me that it's not available in the U.S. I mean, this massive problem here, this massive, disaster that was, precipitated by the pharmaceutical industry, and their cure is Suboxone, which is, as you said, it's another opioid. It's basically a life sentence. And yes, you could live with it. I lived with it for many years, and I function well, but still, you're on opioids, and there's a lot of side effects. And yet, there's a cure. There's actually a cure out there, and if it's administered carefully by doctors, it's very safe. And it boggles my mind. It's another example of just, what's wrong with this country with the lobbies and certain, industries that just simply have laws passed to feed their own profits every single year. And this is a perfect example. I also take mushrooms, by the way. Low dose. I do a microdosing of mushrooms as well. And it's been great for me too. So I think psychedelics are really the next forefront for mental health. And it's really sad this guy passed away, but he left behind an incredible legacy for sure. Yes. Honestly, the reason that they're getting any sort of mainstream play is because of Roland. He is the guy. And he was such a sweet, mild-mannered, intellectual guy. Like, he had really made his bones in studying addiction, and people understood he was legit. He wasn't just looking for a high off of a bunch of patients he was going to have in for a study. He saw. And every person I know who's tried this, I have not tried this, but every person I know who's tried this to treat depression, including in Roland's case, he was treating cancer patients dealing with depression, describes the use of this in a clinical setting as a before and after moment in dealing with their depression, whether it's caused by a terminal illness or anything else. I mean, I'm as anti-drug as they come. I mean, I've never done a drug. I told you this the last time. I was a Miss Goody Two-Shoes, Jordan. Right. But I would try this in a clinical setting if I were dealing with serious depression. It seems like a game changer. Listen, there's also ketamine that's being used now, which is a hallucinogen and very effective for depression, very effective. And the weird thing to me is that they've known this for a really long time, the doctors, the pharmaceutical industry, but the reason they suppress it is because they can't patent it. And since they can't patent it, they can't make money with it. And so they have this PR campaign that it's dangerous, it's terrible. You take one dose of a hallucinogen, you'll jump off a building. That's what I grew up with. I grew up in that era where hallucinogens were like, you'll lose your mind and you'll never come back. So I had a negative anchor against it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's anything but that. So I think thankfully the trend is going in the right direction now. But I assure you the pharmaceutical industry will not go down without a fight. So we'll see what happens.
So once you tried it and you did the 12-hour thing, was that it for you in Suboxone? You didn't need it anymore?
Never again. No,
Wow.
never again. Now, when I got off of it, so physical withdrawals were gone. But it took me about 45 to 60 days to really feel like good again. You know, I was sleeping again and didn't have any anxiety. But I've been very frank. I've lived with anxiety my whole life. I mean, anxiety's been a demon sitting on my shoulder since I'm 6 years old.
You should have had anxiety. What you were doing on Wall Street, that would cause any human anxiety.
That's real fear. That's real fear. It's like, are you paranoid? If they're really chasing you, it's not paranoid. It's real fear, right? But I mean, even before that, and for example, like in the last, after I got off all the Suboxone, I was having anxiety for no reason. Like my life is beautiful, great business, great wife, great family. I'm still having anxiety, and it's very debilitating. And Xanax, I assure you, is not the solution. By the way, that's just like a trap that you fall into, and incredibly addictive. So I roughed it out. And thankfully, now I'm not on anything except lots and lots of supplements for longevity. That's my new addiction is cold plunges in the morning. I do about 6 to 8 minutes at 35 degrees, which is awesome.
Oh.
You should try it, but I strongly recommend it. Right?
I can do 1 minute. I've done them from like 6 to 8 sounds insane.
Yeah, I screwed up this morning, though. I had a radio interview, and I thought it was like 30 minutes later, and I got into the cold plunge. I got out. I'm still shivering, and I had to go on the radio. And I'm like shivering after the thing on the radio. So that was tough. But other than that, it's been amazing. And it also helps you lose weight because you have to burn calories to get your body temperature back up. But most importantly for me, it's anti-inflammatory and a mood enhancer. It's like a legal high. It's like this high that lasts all day long, and it's free. There's no downside to it. So, I mean, thankfully, listen, I think that, there's probably many people, no one in this country has a family that has not somehow been touched by addiction and the opioid crisis. I don't care what family or someone in your family, extended or otherwise, has been touched by this. And there really is a cure. So a cure for this in the form of ibogaine, which is incredibly effective, resets your brain. So I'm a big fan.
Oh, okay. So this is
Not
what inspires
recreationally, though.
Jordan. This is what inspires Jordan in the morning. He does his cold plunge, and he's on the opposite end of the Suboxone and the opioid addiction. And now he wants to help you make a lot of money. The Wolf of Investing. So just as a reminder, Wolf of Wall Street, that's Jordan. There was a whole movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio, who played Jordan. Margot Robbie played his wife. I mean, it's just like you couldn't ask for better casting of one's life. And now, there were some things that weren't necessarily legal, as we pointed out, but you served your time. And now you're trying to help people understand how to make money legally. And I have to say, it's a very timely offering, because we started the show with this New York Times Siena poll showing how awful people feel about the economy. I mean, they feel awful about it. Virtually no one approves of where we are. And more than 2/3 of the country say we are going in the wrong direction, economically and otherwise. And so to feel like someone could empower themselves in this terrible economy by something like this book is a hopeful thought. Everybody would want to do it. So could somebody like me take this book and actually make smart investments?
Absolutely. The whole point of writing this book is in the past, I've coached entrepreneurs. I've taught entrepreneurship, sales, marketing. One thing I never really spoke about, which is something that I knew probably as good as anyone out there in the world, was how to make money on Wall Street. Right. So, finally, after many, many years and seeing where the economy was going and actually experiencing it in my own family, my brother-in-law was getting whipsawed, destroyed. He's a very successful guy, very smart. And I watched someone who's very smart, very educated, very sharp, getting obliterated by doing all the wrong things with his investment portfolio. So I coached him through, how to change his portfolio and redo it in a way that would set him up for long-term success. And that's really was the inspiration for writing this book. It took me about 18 months to write it. And not because I didn't know what the strategies were going to be. I knew from the start what I was going to be talking about. But I knew that if I didn't write it in a really kind of laugh out loud, funny, irreverent way, like people wouldn't really enjoy it or read it as much because, the information for investing is out there, but it's very dry, very boring, very technical. So people don't embrace it. So I wrote this book in a way that's a very funny, ironic voice, but it gives you like literally the keys to the kingdom for building a world-class portfolio that will allow you to retire extremely wealthy, whether you're wealthy now or not. And that's the beauty of this. You don't need a lot of money. And especially in an economy, as you said, you're 100% right. There's a lot of problems systemically in the U.S. economy. There's even more problems politically, which I know we agree on that, right? And when you see what's going on college campuses, it makes you scared for the whole world. But the fact is that the one solution that you can have for yourself and your family is make a lot of money and invest it wisely so you're set up for the future, because you can't count on the government. You can't count on a booming economy when you're retired. So you need to take matters into your own hands. And the way you do it is not by hiring a stockbroker, putting your money in a mutual fund or like a managed mutual fund, or trying to find the next pipe from a hedge fund or penny stock or crypto coin. Is a very simple, proven way that anybody can secure their future through proper investing. And that's really what I lay out in the book. It's a turnkey solution for anybody, even if you don't have a lot of money.
Well, especially because I know we don't like to talk about this as a country. The Republicans want to ignore it. Democrats want to ignore it. But you're probably not going to get your Social Security. If you're 40 or younger, there's probably not going to be Social Security for you. We like to lie and say, oh, no, it's like, we're only going to mess with it for like people who are in their 20s. Bullshit. The whole program is going under. They're really out of money. Social Security and Medicare. Medicaid's also in trouble. So they just keep ignoring all of this. I mean, even the trustees who run the program say at minimum in 10 years, you're going to get 20% less. And so you can't rely on those.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't rely on those to fund your retirement.
Yeah. Well, it might be around when we're old. I think it will be, but it'll be enough to pay for your diapers when you're in a nursing home. That's about it. If you think you're going to rely on that to pay your rent and your expenses, I mean, think again, right? So you're 100% right. And that problem is only getting worse. The political divide is so intense right now that nothing good is getting accomplished in Congress, and forget the executive branch with this hologram there right now. But still, even when there's a Republican there, there's systemic problems. You need to secure your own future. And you know what happens, Megyn? It's sad, but who gets squeezed the most? It's the middle class and the lower class. The rich are going to always make money and be very rich, and that's that top 5%. They're going to be okay. It's everyone else that gets screwed. So, and I think the trap that people fall into when they invest, and this is the essence of the book, is that when you look at how much money you have to invest, or what do you have in your savings account or stock account, you say, well, I don't have that much. I have maybe $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, whatever it might be. That's not enough to build, massive wealth. Because I have to hit a home run. I have to find the next Apple computer. I have to find the next Bitcoin or some, penny stock. You start to think you need massive returns to get ahead. And that's the opposite of the truth. You don't. By investing in actually the best stocks in a certain way and relying on long-term compounding, which is, every single year you're compounding the profits from the previous, you could take a very small amount of money and turn it into millions of dollars over time. So,
but how do you figure out? I know you say in the book, you've got to figure out, you got to sort of see the good news coming on a stock before everybody else sees it, because otherwise, then you lose the advantage of the stock raise after you bought it at a lower number. But that seems easier said than done. Like, if we could figure that out, we'd all be, making money on Wall Street. People, how are you supposed to do it? Like, the best scheme I ever saw was in Trading Places, where they did it illegally. Yeah. But for those of us who have to do it legally.
Yeah, it's not easier said than done. It's almost impossible. You can't do it. And what I say in the book is that, if you want to speculate, that's fine. So take a small portion of your money, let's say 5% of the money that you have, and speculate. Try to time the market, pick individual stocks, invest before the news comes out, and try to be on the right side of that news so you make a lot of money really quickly, right? That's a fool's game. That's not how you make money in the stock market. That's been historically proven by every academic study going back to the early 1900s. And this is not just for average investors, the top investors, the top hedge fund managers, the top mutual fund managers, analysts, they can't pick a stock any better than the average person. And I'm not even kidding with this. Every study has proven this. And especially after you include all the fees and performance bonuses and ticket charges and expenses and everything else that they hit you for. And by the way, in the hedge fund world, it's like, if they win, they take 20%. If they lose, you pay all the losses. So it's heads they win, tails you lose, right? So it's a total con job. And the thing is, you don't need to do that. There's a far better way than to invest. And it's not about timing the market. It's not about trying to beat the news cycle. You're going to lose more often than not that way, all right? Look at it this way, right? So when you go into a casino, right, typically the odds are against you, by 5%, maybe 7%, depending on the game, right? So when you go in there, you can expect to, over time, most people are going to lose. But then if you walk into a corrupt casino where they have loaded dice or dealing from the bottom of the deck, you're going to lose 50% or 80% of the time, right? You're always going to lose. It's a huge edge, right, to the house. Well, that's Wall Street. You're dealing against the corruption there where they have faster computers than you, access to news before you have it, right? They're doing things that are illegal on a daily basis. And we all know that's happening. We all know it's happening at the biggest firms down to the smallest ones. So if you want to play in that corrupt casino, you're going to get slaughtered. So like the old movie War Games, remember War Games with Matthew Broderick? Of course. The only way to win is not to play. You can't play that game. But on the flip side, Wall Street does create massive value for the U.S. and, for that matter, the global economy. So Wall Street's a necessary part of the economy for its functioning. They take companies public. They see which ones are worthy of further financing. They secure the credit markets, the debt markets. We need Wall Street. So they serve this mission critical function on one side, which is the good side. And then the other side, they create bubbles and rip your eyeballs out with extra fees, commissions, and so forth. So the question really is, how do you extract, as an average person here in America or elsewhere, how do you extract your fair share of the value that Wall Street creates without getting caught up in the corrupt casino and losing it all? That's the strategy that I offer in the book. And by the way, it's the exact strategy that Warren Buffett would give you, and any really legitimate top investor would tell you, this is the way you do it. And I'll tell you, the short story is it starts with having the biggest position in the no commission, ultra low expense S&P 500 index fund. That's where it starts. So that's one big position you're going to want to have, and your main position. And then you're going to want to have that in certain types of accounts, tax-free accounts when possible. There's a number of those, but also just your general account. And then you want to be adding to that position just a little bit each month, whether it's $50, $100, hopefully a lot more. But whatever you can add to that slowly over time without worrying, saying, oh, I don't know, I think the economy is going to do bad next year, so I'm going to get out of stocks and sit in cash or go into oil. Or like if you listen to like Jim Cramer on CNBC, I mean, this guy's like, he's like a toxic Avenger, this guy. I mean, he's telling you to trade this for that and try to time the market. You don't win like that. No one wins that way.
He's always wrong.
I mean, it's like a joke, but it's like, and his knowledge base is vast. But he's giving the worst advice in the world, as almost everyone else on CNBC. So that's a real trap. You watch it and you're like, oh, maybe I should be selling my stocks today or selling this sector right now because the economy seems to be slowing down. That's nonsense. That's not how you make money in the stock market. You need to buy and hold for like 20, 30 years. Seriously. And it might seem like a long time, but it's actually not. Because you don't buy individual stocks. You buy the whole index, the S&P 500. Why do you do that? I'll tell you why. Number one, it's the 500 biggest, baddest, most profitable companies in the United States. In addition, about 40% of their business comes from overseas. So you get overseas exposure as well. Number two, all right, they are not the same companies that they were 5 years ago. Every 3 months, the S&P meets the index committee and they replace the companies that are not doing as well, becoming less relevant. They also reweight the index to reflect the U.S. economy. So at any given moment, the S&P 500 represents the best companies, the most relevant companies, and the weighting of the U.S. economy. So you're buying the U.S. economy. Now, you might say, well, isn't the economy in the shitter? Or isn't it going to go bad? Isn't there all these systemic problems? The answer is yes, but it's like the best bad option out there. In other words, the money's got to go somewhere, right? And what happens is, I don't care how bad the world is doing. I think Apple is going to have a bright future, as is Google. These big companies are massive. They're multinationals. They're very well run. And when they fall from grace, which they do from time to time, they get replaced. So the S&P 500 is this ultra tax efficient. You have to keep buying and selling it. It's this tax efficient way of having exposure to the very best that American ingenuity, that the American capitalist system has to offer. And I don't care what you say, there's no better system out there for creating wealth than the capitalist system that we have here. I've been all over the world. Okay, what you say, when I was younger in the 80s, it was Japan's taking over the world. Remember that? Japan, they're going to own everything. And then you saw all the systemic problems there. China's now going to take up, there's problems in China. So at the end of the day, I truly believe that a bet on the U.S. economy is a very, very safe bet. And it's been that way for the last 100 years or so. So that's the first thing you want to know is don't trade in and out.
Once again, the name of the book is The Wolf of Investing by Jordan Belfort, the wolf himself. Jordan, let me ask you how you view the finances and whether they're important of the guys running for president right now, and gals, I should say. Most of these guys are public servants and haven't made a ton of dough because they've been in government service, like Ron DeSantis. He went to, it was Princeton, or his Harvard undergrad, and then Yale Law School, I think it was. And he could have been making a fortune at some law firm, but he's done all public service his life, Navy, JAG Corps, and then governor and congressman and so on. Nikki Haley's made some money in the private sector, but has mostly been a government service person. Vivek made a bunch of money in the pharmaceutical industry, sort of big pharma, taking patents that had been rejected by a bunch of companies in big pharma and trying to get them a second life. And then you got Doug Burgum. He's made a ton of money. Like, do you care? Trump, of course, is reportedly the richest of them all. Do we care whether we have a rich president or not?
Well, I mean, I think we see our current president, who was, a public servant, completely corrupted by, through his son and all this other stuff, and taking bribes from all. I mean, hello. I mean, imagine if this was a Republican in office, it would be the front page of the New York Times, like literally nonstop, to impeach this guy, right? It's like, I can't even believe like what I'm seeing here in our country with the corruption in the White House right now. And it's like this, wait, the other side doesn't think this is relevant to talk about, right? Although I guess people are getting wise to it, because like you see the latest polls, right? People are not happy with the person in the White House who's really just a kind of a hologram for someone else who's behind the scenes and really running the show. But I think that, listen, I wouldn't say that it matters per se, because it's based on the person's character. If someone's got the character, they're going to resist the bribery and resist having being under the thumb of lobbyists, right? And I think DeSantis is like that, by the way. And I don't think I think he's a very honest guy. But I think that once they get out of the presidency, they're going to get rich. They'll write their books and do their speaking tours, and that's okay. And that's nothing wrong with that, by the way. For a public servant, if you become president, you get out, you get rich. All the power to you, right? But they shouldn't be, when they're there, engaging in corruption, or have gotten corrupt along the way as they are public servants and they're in the White House as it is now. So I don't really care if they're rich or poor. What I do care, though, is about experience. And do they have the experience and the intellect to do the job? It's a very difficult job. And, right now, I believe that only a handful of the candidates have the experience, or the emotional metal to be the president of the United States.
It takes a lot of it. Do you have a favorite right now on the GOP side who you're rooting for?
I loved DeSantis. I did when he was, and I was really hoping he'd get the traction I thought he was going to get. There's things I love about Trump, things I hate about Trump. I think Trump is his own worst enemy, but I look at the world the way it was under his presidency. It just seemed like a better world. I mean, for sure. There was no wars per se, far less conflict in the world. We were energy independent. So what was Biden's first move? Let's just give up our energy independence. And that set the stage for so much awful shit that poured in after that. It's like, let's just Sabbath. Let's just shoot ourselves in the foot here and no longer be energy independent. Let's rely on other people and not be exporters. It's insane. It's insane. So that was his first move. And so I have mixed emotions about Trump. Trump, if you look at what was going on, it was very good for the country. It really was. But there's also like this divisiveness. Now, granted, he was, attacked and he was framed for things he didn't do. So he was under constant attack. Do I think he's the nicest guy in the world? No, I don't. And I was hoping for a better version of him. But if it's Trump or Biden, I'll take Trump any day of the week and twice on Sundays. I'll tell you that much.
You're not alone, according to the latest poll.
I'll put up with the tweets. I'll put up with the bad tweets,
Well, now he's on Truth Social, so you don't even have to look at them if you don't want to join his social media company. You can just ignore. I don't know. The country's in some dire shape. What do you think? Like the people out there who are really worried about the economy, because there are a lot of them, and Joe Biden just keeps saying Bidenomics. It's working. Trust me, it's working. How is the economy in your view, and how's it likely to go over the next few years? You feeling bullish or bearish?
I'm feeling bearish on the economy overall. The problem is inflation. It's a major problem. And I think it's much higher. I know it's much higher than they're reporting. And, what is that inflation from? When you pay people to not go to work and you just pump money into the economy, what's going to happen? It's like a guarantee that inflation is going to eventually skyrocket, right? So we're feeling the pains of all this money that was pumped into the economy during the pandemic. And, finally it got to the point where they, inflation, so on, they had to do something to bring down rates. But I don't think that's necessarily just the whole thing is rates, is rates going up. I don't think that's going to solve it on its own. There's got to be a fundamental shift in America, the way we view ourselves as Americans, getting back to work, not trying to be on the dole. And really, and every person being part of this sort of renaissance for the country. We need a leader that inspires people to go out there and work hard as a country. That's what's missing right now. It's like this. We talk about a divide, but you look at these marches right now. And these people, what the hell? I don't even recognize. Megyn, do you recognize the country right now? I don't recognize it.
All those people waving Palestinian flags in front of the White House, screaming Allahu Akbar. It's a no.
I don't understand it because, all those woke people, whether gay people that, transsexual, they go to Gaza and see how tolerant they are in Gaza. They'll murder you. They'll string you up alive. Or if you're a woman, go there and they'll have you wear a burqa. Or a hijab, whatever. The point is people don't even know what they're protesting for. About
it all comes down to skin color and oppression. Their view of oppression. They don't even understand oppression. Listen, that's all a big tease for the Wolf of Investing, because anytime you want to hear what Jordan has to think, it's worth your time. He's entertaining, he's brilliant, and you're going to love the book. The Wolf of Investing. Thank you, my friend, for being back on.
Number 1 on Amazon right now, so check it out. Investing in stocks, so check it out.
Right now, check it out. All the best. See you soon.